Welcome, welcome. The European internet blockade of Russian propagandist media. My name is Chris Keulemans. I'll be moderating. We're all talking and thinking about Ukraine. We will be speaking about this crucial question tonight. But of course we begin by thinking about the people and the destruction. And I would like to ask Vesna Manolovich to speak up.
Hi everyone. Hello. I would like to invite you to join me in a minute of silence to make space for the grief and the mourning and the sadness for all the losses and destructions. Specifically about the war, but also because of the pandemic and the climate crisis. So let's create some space to feel this sadness, and so that we can later move on and be kind to each other and continue with the life that is still available to us, while it is not for the ones that have lost either life or health or connections. So please, let's stand up for 1 minute. Thank you.
Yes, welcome everyone here today who has been in this room, but also everyone who is joining us online. I am Maria Fonotoch. I'm a researcher at the Institute of Network Cultures, which analyzes and shapes the terrain of network cultures through events, publications, and research. I've had the pleasure of being part of the Technical Media Room for these past months. So beginning of February, after the invasion of Russia in Ukraine, a group of hackers, artists, designers, and researchers in the Netherlands came together in support of technical media, journalists, newsrooms, and civic initiatives from Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. They've been coming together on a weekly basis to discuss matters around technical media. And tonight is our attempt at opening these discussions up and involving everyone, because of course this goes far beyond the scope of just us, but involves really everyone. So we want to create a space to think about and discuss how we want to shape the media landscape and platform politics. We're going to start the evening with an update on the current status of internet infrastructure and journalism, with talks by Ruben Brave and Elmas Azanova. Ruben is a media professional and tech entrepreneur. He's the chairman of Internet Society Netherlands and board member of various impactful tech and media-related organizations. And Elmas is a Crimean Tatar Ukrainian journalist and activist. She's the author of several documentaries about the past and present of Crimean Tatars. We also have a contribution by Sofia Kornienko, who unfortunately can't be here tonight, but we will recite her text that she contributed, and her text will also be publicized through INC, so be sure to check the blog and you can see what she's written. After these updates, we will delve into the debate with our moderator of tonight, who's also already been introduced, Chris. He's the director of Bali, the founder of Purdue and the cultural center, the Tolhuistuin, and he's also a fantastic moderator, so we're very happy that you could join us tonight. Thank you very much. I'd like to give the word to Ruben.
kijken. Hello, yeah. Yes, so she told you that, and it's true, that I'm chairman of Internet Society Netherlands. Internet Society Netherlands is a interest advocacy group organization founded actually by the technical fathers of the internet. Probably they're also mothers, but they are often forgotten. Bob Kahn and Vint Cerf. And I'm the chairman of the Dutch chapter. And yeah, Internet Society Netherlands has approximately 1,000 members in the Netherlands. Yeah, thank you for inviting me, and thank you for organizing this very important event. We have been part of the tactical media room from the beginning, actually, because we see this as a very important topic. Or we already saw this as a very important topic, as we started a working group called a media working group called don't catch me on the name, but it's called Make Media Great Again. Of course, yeah, we found that, well, it was a project that we started in the beginning. We thought that the name was funny. Now we don't think the name is so funny anymore, because a lot of bad things obviously have happened due to the impact of media. What I would like to share with you is some results of our collaboration with the Tactical Media Room. And this involved an overview, and it's definitely not a complete overview, of events that have happened during the start, actually, of the war in Ukraine. So this is what I'm showing you here is our internet website, where we have posted the collaboration with Michael Dieter. I don't know if he's present currently, but this document keeps track of changes of platform policies. We're still updating this as much as possible. Well, the main takeaway, because I'm not going to go through all the events, of course, is that we could see that, yeah, it started actually in cyberspace. And so you can see that Russian state institutes and military organs, they started to attack Ukrainian relevant sites. And after that, you can see that also some corporates are starting to respond to it. So you see a lot of things happening with cybersecurity that becomes very relevant. And you also can see that a lot of media partners, such as we see also WeTransfer, which is very big in the Netherlands, they have started to shift their policy to avoid transfer to Russian or through Russian parties. So for us, the main takeaway is that we see that the internet has different layers. Of course, Internet Society focuses on the infrastructure layer, so it's the hardware and the protocol layer of the internet. But we also see that it starts to interact with other layers of the internet, and that this impacts society at large. One of the worrying issues that we see now is Internet Society, because the mission of Internet Society is a free and open internet and secure internet for everybody on this planet, is that we see internet as an essential infrastructure of the world, actually. So talking about blockages of internet, in our perspective, should be very detailed, should be very focused, but also we are not sure if internet blockages are to be enforced on the technical layer. Mostly because we believe that the internet, as it is now a invasive part of daily life, should also be constructed through governmental policy. So this is where we conduct our what we call cyber diplomacy to inform relevant stakeholders about capacity building with regards to cybersecurity, but also related to inclusivity, because we see that, and it also relates to disinformation, groups that are sensitive, susceptible to narratives that drive and that disable actually social cohesion are often victims of targeted misinformation or disinformation campaigns. So to close off, I found some websites actually, some from trusted sources that show that, let me see here one. You could see that African Americans, this is related to the pandemic, for instance, but also here, yeah. What happens is that deficiencies in society are being exploited, in this case by Russia, to disable actually society. And the main takeaway is for us, as we're also advising, for instance, in this case, this afternoon, actually, the municipality of Amsterdam, that there is a deeper layer in society that is often not handled. And if this is not been taken care of, this makes us vulnerable to the so-called disinformation campaigns. So the question is, are we going to cut off the information on technical layer, or are we going to have a discussion within society about, in this case, this concerns diversity and inclusion, but you can also see anti-LGBTQ plus propaganda as a big part of Russia's war effort. So all the deficiencies in society are being exploited, and the narrative is being steered to disable social cohesion. These are my findings, and so the last thing to close off, one of the conclusions that we had from the academic working group of the municipality of Amsterdam, that polarization is tiring. It costs a lot of energy. So to stay polarized, you need a lot of energy. And to have patience and de-escalate is often the most effective way to deal with disinformation campaigns. And that was my contribution. Yeah.
Thank you, Ruben. Take your seat. Crystal clear and coming from important position. Do we block this information on technical layer, or do we counter this information in different ways? Vesna, Elmas Asanova, you were introduced by Maria. You will give us the introduction here, and I am sure we will learn from you how vitally important, on a human level, questions like these are.
Good evening, dear participants, journalists of such an important event. I am honored to be among you. Until 2014, as a journalist, I couldn't even imagine what kind of truth for information that is based on real events, and eventually for your opinion, for your position, you can suffer. You can receive a warning notice from the punitive authorities because you want to honor the memory of your ancestors in your native land. However, lies and disinformation are actively encouraged there by the occupying regime. After the aggression of the Russian invasion of Crimea in 2014, the editorial offices of independent media were searched, and the Crimean Tatar TV channel ATR was not spread. The profession of an independent and objective journalist became a dangerous career choice under the occupation. Free media, which did not submit to the invaders, had to leave the peninsula due to systematic pressure, threats and searches, both in the editorial offices and in the homes of journalists. After 2014, my colleagues, journalists from among the Crimean Tatars, suffered to a greater extent. Our people opposed the occupation and did not accept the occupying power that was established in 2014. For understanding, I want to give you a few examples of what happened to my fellow journalists after 2014 and what is still happening on the peninsula. In the first days of the occupation of Crimea, my colleague Ibrahim Umerov, when he was fulfilling his professional duty, filming the siege of the Bogdan Auto car dealership, was attacked by armed people. All this happened on live broadcast, but this did not stop the Russian invaders. Ibrahim was beaten, his phone was taken away so that he could not contact anyone, and the operator's equipment was taken away. I must also tell you about a journalist, political scientist, human rights activist, and one of the young leaders, Nariman Celal. Nariman Celal, respected by all of us, whom I know personally, did not leave the peninsula after 2014. Being in the Crimea, he called the events by their proper names. Media controlled by the occupiers were close to him. He used his social networks and independent media, which are mainly located on the territory of Free Ukraine. He talked about every search, kidnapping, other violation of the rights of the indigenous people of Crimea, and discrimination that the Crimean Tatars face experience. He tried to help the families of political prisoners. He actively participated on international platforms, talking about systematic search in the homes of Crimean Tatars and about the fate of illegally convicted compatriots. He was a voice that was not afraid to speak the truth, even if he was repeatedly warned and asked to be quiet. In September last year, in order to silence and isolate him from society, first of all from his people, Nariman Celal was detained, accused of sabotage. Now he is in pre-trial detention center. They want to put him in prison for 15 years. The accusation is based only on the testimony of hidden witnesses. There is not a single piece of evidence. At the time, the Crimean media controlled by the invaders on the day of Nariman's detention without trial or investigation called him a saboteur, as if his guilt had been proven. At the same time, Russian politicians, public figures, bloggers on television, on the YouTube platform, justify the deportation and genocide of the Crimean Tatars, justify the persecution of representatives of our people, systematically humiliate, insult. But the Russian law enforcement agencies that de facto control Crimea do not react to this. No one is responsible for insulting and abusive words, insulting the Crimean Tatars on national basis, for frankly false materials in the media and publication and comments on social networks. Propaganda media outlets continue to use the terms extremists and terrorists in relation to the Crimean Tatars. All because our people do not recognize the occupation of Crimea and do not recognize the occupying regime and continue the non-violent struggle. The whole civilized world is in solidarity with us. This irritates the occupiers and the media controlled by them. Crimean Tatars extremists are raising the Crimea issue against the backdrop of the conflict on Donbass. Why are Crimean Tatars, radicals, fighting for Crimea while it is getting farther and farther from Ukraine? Why has it not been possible to clean up the radical Crimean Tatar underground in 5 years on the peninsula? Such headlines are full of propaganda media in the Crimea and in Russia as well. This is all within the framework of the Russian state information policy. Dear colleagues, we have all gathered here and discussed the influence of Russian propaganda. How it poisons people's minds. I, as a representative of the indigenous Crimean Tatar people, wonder who will be held responsible and when will they be held responsible for insulting my people, my feelings? Why is Russian media, without trial or investigation, allowed to call my people extremists and terrorists? They are replicating this all over the world in order to discredit our people before the world community. How long will I be humiliated in my native land? After 2014, Ukrainian and international independent information resources were blocked in Crimea. It is not possible to open any information portal to read or see the true picture of what is happening in Ukraine and in the world. This is done on purpose to deprive people of the truth information, so that people remain under the full influence of the propaganda machine and become hostages of their lies and untruthful. Crimea has become a peninsula of fear, madness, and information ghetto. On my native peninsula, propaganda media actively creates the image of Crimean Tatars as terrorists and extremists, and Ukrainians are shown as nationalists and Nazis. Against the background, history is being rewritten by destroying the Crimean Tatar ethnic group. They creating a new myth about the Russian Crimea. Propaganda media only contribute to this, incite and create hate speeches. YouTube and other international platforms are only used by them to spread lies. Only by blocking the propaganda media machine on these platforms can we deprive them of the ability to poison the minds of people in the territories of occupiers and the other countries. The current Russian regime is held together by intimidation, lies and propaganda. We must end this. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Elmas. It is just a shocking account of how the clash between reporting on the facts and the propagandist media is causing so much human tragedy and is causing violence and damage to people who are trying to tell us what is actually going on. And of course the Crimean Tatars have been victims of this kind of propaganda for decades and decades. You mentioned that the Russian state propaganda is not held accountable, will not be held accountable for the near future. There's no legal system in place to counter their work. On the contrary, platforms like YouTube, you mentioned, carry that kind of propaganda. And that is what this evening is also about. Now, we are here. I think the discussion started because the European Union immediately after the beginning of the invasion banned Russia Today and Sputnik for the European Union. As Ruben already said, this could be a precedent of blocking disinformation on a technical level, while you might prefer countering disinformation in other ways. That is what we're here to talk about. Excellent example, very dangerous example too, but it poses the free, open, inclusive, stable and impartial internet that we all stand for with a huge dilemma. That is what Sofia Kornienko also was thinking about. We hoped she would be here live. She couldn't be here live. Many people know her. She's a Russian-Dutch journalist, worked for Radio Liberty Russian desk for a long time. She worked for other European outlets. Since the beginning of the war, she's been campaigning for support to independent media and journalists within or from Russia. And she gave us this text, which I will now read. I think it's very special, interesting text, so I hope you will bear with me. This party never stops, time is dead, and meaning has no meaning. Existence is upside down, and I reign supreme. My daughter, she writes, loves reciting whole dialogues from Disney's animated series Gravity Falls, but this particular quote by the show's demonic antagonist has really stuck with me as a prophetic description of our postmodern time. This party never stops, time is dead, and meaning has no meaning. I remember how back in early 2014 I was a guest on Dutch television arguing that King Willem-Alexander and Princess Maxima shouldn't go to Russia and drink champagne with Putin. It was just a few weeks prior to the Russian invasion of the Crimea. The host asked me something along the lines of, why should we be careful with Putin? What danger are you talking about? What threat does he pose to the West? To which I answered, Russia's main export is not oil and gas, but the idea that there is no truth. Year after year, the Kremlin has been pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into this particular export. It wasn't about censorship. It was about deflating once meaningful words, such as war or Nazi, to empty sounds. It wasn't about keeping secrets, but about creating so many wild and vastly different versions of every event in what was already a very informationally saturated environment, that the audience would start thinking the truth was unknowable. Of course, this gaping abyss between image and meaning is hardly Putin's invention. Jean Baudrillard's theory of empty simulacra has become a classic in media studies, exacerbated by digital technologies. Back in 2006, I wrote my MA thesis at the media department of the University of Amsterdam here about how the image of Islam in the media has lost its meaning. I must apologize for the graphic allusion, but sinister performances of the terror attacks in the early 2000s were like a postmodern reenactment of René Magritte. Ceci n'est pas une pipe. This is not war. This is not pregnant women being shelled. This is not a shopping mall being targeted. Writer Vladimir Sorokin has even suggested Putin may not be hoping for a victory, but doing everything purely for the horrific effect for media and historic attention, like a suicide terrorist. And Russian film director Sergei Loznitsa has observed how in reaction to hopeless, desperate life situations, humans rely on surrealism as a coping mechanism. It is in uncertainty that even in the democratic world, people are made extremely gullible to conspiracy theories and manipulation, because it helps them to at least find simple explanations and culprits responsible for their misfortunes in the otherwise chaotic sea of information. In the Gravity Falls animated series, the diabolic antagonist says he liberates the world this way by stripping it of meaning. Indeed, if facts no longer matter, if the borderline between war and peace is smudged, there is no grip and no future. Time is dead. World War II never ends. Fascists keep coming back. Anything you do doesn't matter anymore. Any crime, any mass murder. So, what should be our coping mechanism in the face of all of this? I was quite taken aback upon hearing that a few of my European colleagues from the Freedom of Information Coalition have launched a complaint about the legitimacy of the EU-wide blockade of Russian state channels such as Russia Today and Sputnik, calling the proportionality of the measures into question. In May 2022, they signed a petition that seeks to preserve access to all information and sent it to the European Court in Luxembourg. Cybersecurity experts define two main components of cybersecurity. Protection from coordinated disinformation and harassment campaigns is number one. One must add, especially at the time of unprecedented aggression. And number two is putting internet users in charge of their private data to make sure that the likes of Cambridge Analytica never get hold of it. The same technology will make it very easy to verify social media accounts as genuine as opposed to automated bots or fake identities. Independent researchers are also busy developing verification AIs as well as strategies to train social media algorithms and to hold tech giants accountable. A recent MIT Media Lab study published in Nature found that the current design of social media platforms may discourage people from reflecting on accuracy. The researchers suggest there are possible interventions that social media platforms could use to increase users' focus on accuracy. Yet, the most powerful antidote to manipulation in the free world is media literacy. This is why we should stop enforcing the stereotype of the web as a dark, dangerous place and instead see it as a tool for digital democracy, meaningful connections and knowledge. The algorithms reinforce what we make of it. It is essential that kids and teens currently subject to inhumane ageist discrimination and screen control culture imposed by regulators who lag years behind in their understanding of technological processes get better access to the web and the emerging metaverse. It is those who've been highly regulated and have been unable to teach themselves basic media literacy that fall easy prey to manipulators. Let's enable a new generation of meaningful creators respected in their right to get all the time they need to get to the bottom of things in the world's pool of knowledge. Let's be there for them to hear them out instead of controlling them. So, I think Sophia gave us her point of view through this text. I hope you're still with us. We're going to open it up now, first to a few other people we invited to join us in this conversation, and then to all of you. That is why we created this informal setting. Many of you might be familiar with the concept of the so-called fish bowl. It means if you're in the inner circle, you speak. If you want to join the inner circle because you have something to say, there is always a chair or two available for you. So please later on feel free to join us in this fishbowl. There's always a chair available. If somebody enters, it also means somebody else from the circle has to leave. So in that way, we try to create a lively and inclusive kind of talk. Because I'm sure everybody here has so much to say about these things. To begin with, Maria, help me, because you created a very brief thesis starting statement, which I will read now, and which I would like to drop into this circle, and I will ask responses from the people here who we haven't heard yet. Is freedom of speech sacrosanct, or Does the distribution of content via the internet come with responsibilities? And if so, where lies that responsibility? I'll do it again. Is freedom of speech sacrosanct? So, is it holy? Is it, does it know no boundaries? Is it always the most important thing we have? Or does the distribution of content via the internet come with responsibilities? And if so, where lies that responsibility? Responsibilities meaning if there's a crisis like we are experiencing now, we might have to let go of some freedom of speech in order to keep our main communication through the internet infrastructure, let's say, sane. Sub-questions, I'll just mention them briefly so you know in what kind of vocabulary we're thinking here. Who are duty bearers? So who have the responsibility for the infrastructure and the governance of the internet? How do these decisions affect internet connectivity? If we ban Russia Today and Sputnik, what is the next step? And will we lose some of the connectivity that the internet is there for? Will censoring Putin's propaganda machine be a precedent for the future curbing of freedom of the press and internet freedom? So now we might all agree we have to ban this state propaganda. But if we do so, is that a precedent for moments later on in our life when other platforms that we might agree with will also be blocked? Will the acceptance of genocidal propaganda steer illiberalism in Europe? That will have those consequences. So will the acceptance of genocidal propaganda, like we see now on Russia Today and Sputnik, steer, encourage, inflame illiberalism in Europe? That will have those consequences. So they will take similar steps later in the future. That's what we're talking about here. And we have 4 people here we didn't hear yet. All 4 of them, I'll join you for a minute. I won't sit here too long because these chairs are yours, yeah? But who would like to respond to this main short thesis? Ilya, Niels, Geert, Vesna. You want to respond?
Yeah, go ahead.
But you're not in the circle yet. Take my chair, please.
Yeah, hello everybody.
And introduce yourself.
My name is Diana Dzigora. I'm from Kiev, from Ukraine, and I spent 15 years of my life working for government of Ukraine, and I work as a press secretary in the Ministry of Emergency Situations in Ukraine. And of course I have a lot of friends who are famous journalists in Ukraine. The last years I established, 5 years ago, I established an NGO organization, Ukrainian Journalists with Disabilities. So we try to teach people with disability how to work in mass media, how to write articles, to take interview and to be representatives in international sport competitions like Paralympic Games. And the first thing that journalists should know is the searchers of information. If you want to know the truth, you should ask where this truth coming from. And if you're curious, of course you will research where is information coming from. In Russian propaganda, they just telling us some things and people just listen and eat in this and believe in this. But as Ruben says, you should have a critical mind and always think what you reading and where it's coming from. And it's very important. For instance, when the war started, I think, what can I do to avoid, to help people to know the truth? And I just make a simple group on Facebook with a simple name, Ukraine. In the first months, this group with 5 people became 10,000 very quickly. I'm not writing anything myself over there. I'm just reporting the information from the official searches, like the Office of President of Ukraine, the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, and other information from Ukrainian official websites. And in this small group, Ukraine, I can find now people from all over the world, from Brazil, from Spain, from Africa, from everywhere, but not from Ukraine, because Ukrainian people know how to find truth information. Mm-hmm. And some people, for instance, from far away from the world, I don't know where they are from Korea, they write to me and asking me to explain them simple things. So I think the most important to fight with propaganda, just to be curious. And
thank you. And I think you gave us a great example of how you were doing that when you were in Kiev, and how important this is for the next generations.
Yeah, I hope to live and stay in Netherlands, because I'm here already 1 year. My husband Dutch, and I live in Den Haag. But from the beginning of the war, first 2 weeks I can't sleep, I can't eat, because I was so worried about my mom. She's living in Kiev and she's sitting over there with my doggy.
Good.
So she arrived, and now I feel a little bit, yeah.
Welcome, thank you.
Thank you so much for supporting Ukraine and discussing these very important topics. Yeah,
and it comes alive through stories like yours. Ilya Sharbitsky, you're originally from Belarus. We know that press freedom in Belarus has been shaky for the past decades, to put it very, very mildly.
In whole existence, even.
Yeah. And you've been campaigning from here for, let's say, the remaining independent information channels from and about Belarus. I think in the Belarus community here in the Netherlands, you are one of the campaigners, very visible, very powerful. Could you give us your perspective on this question?
Yeah, I think we have to think a couple of freedoms. So we have freedom in Europe, and we have freedom in, let's say, post-Soviet space, or how I call it, Russification space. I think Russification has been itself propaganda for many years or centuries in our region, in Belarus, or the region of next to Russia. So it's been, I think, what our people has been tackling is propaganda for centuries. You know, this is not, this propaganda did not start 10 years ago, 20 years ago. This propaganda started with the Tsarist Russia, with true Russification. And our peoples, Ukraine and Crimean, I don't think that we really experience what is freedom. So to us, what is freedom is always what we see on TV, and we kind of imagine it. We never got educated in freedom. We never got educated in media literacy. And it's really hard to kind of, after Soviet Union, to teach and to tell people now who grew up in Soviet Union or who lived through Soviet Union, what is the truth, what is freedom, and try to find in the middle ground what you need to read and what you need to find. We've been establishing quite a lot of projects in the last 2 years to actually go and find freedom. It's been initiatives that started by the journalists that fled the country. We have media hubs in Vilnius and Warsaw. We used to have them in Kiev as well. I'm not sure if they're that much active, but they're all moved down to Poland. And slowly, I think it's been awakening in Belarusian society to educate ourselves in what is freedom, what is truth, what is justice, and finding the middle ground for that. Mm-hmm. We have, I think, a project called Sama is that, and it's basically a PDF format. People receive a PDF format, and then sneakily they will put in the mailboxes of their neighbors this paper. Mm-hmm. So it's a kind of on-the-ground network of paper that it's banned, but people still deliver it to your neighbors, to people around you. Yeah. And there are more and more now initiatives that are made by journalists to bring the media to people in Belarus. Mm-hmm. And people sign up to this. So people are interested to find out the truth. Because people know they had enough of propaganda. You know, you turn on TV. In Belarus, it's a bit even different, because we have 7 Belarusian channels and 7 Russian channels, and they all spew propaganda. So we have 7 channels about Lukashenko visiting 7 places in one day, and Putin visiting 10 places in one day. Mm-hmm. So it's some people have had enough of it. They cannot just watch it anymore, and some people are not watching TV, and third people just are trying to educate themselves as well. Yeah. So I think it's going to be a long process for Belarus to recover from Russification, from propaganda, to understand what freedom is. Is freedom sacred? Is freedom fighting for? Or getting rid of the Russification that has been happening through centuries? I hope it will still happen in my generation, but I see that it's really deeply rooted in society. Yeah. So it's going to be a long way to get to even a space like this in Belarus to talk about internet freedom and internet safety. Mm-hmm. I know we have this now more and more, but it's outside of Belarus. Yeah. And people in Belarus don't have this conversation. People in Belarus outside of Minsk don't even have conversation about what is truth. Yeah. You know, and that's kind of saddening even to hear about.
It is very important, your contribution to this talk, because you're talking about generations of people who have no grasp of the fundamental concept of truth, freedom, justice. More and more people are attracted by what you just said. No, but because if so many people for so long have no grasp of these fundamental principles, concepts, then yes, what we're seeing now is so dangerous, is even more, is amplifying the danger, amplifying the destruction. So I want to actually go to, yeah, and I'll you go first, Elmas, and then I want to go to Niels ten Oever.
I am also, I want to tell my example. Russia invests a lot of energy about Crimea. Crimea is Russian territory, and it's also propaganda. I agree with you because it started not now. Russian people's minds saturated by propaganda many years ago, from Catherine time, and but if, as example, we take Crimean Tatars, we were majority in Crimea, but Russia tried saturate out our mind, but could not. This depends on, first of all, from people. We showed our resistance many years, and we even now show our resistance. We have a lot of political prisoners because we don't live under Russia, under Russian system. But Russian peoples like this system. They never showed their resistance. It depends on only from people, from nations.
Yeah. Again, you're giving, like Ilya, an example of people fighting for their right to the truth, resisting the propaganda. But this is
all the system,
and the whole system, of course. But then the internet plays such an important role right now. So Niels ten Oever, researcher, vice president for the Global Internet Governance academic network, which is exactly what it says. And I think you are very well positioned to have an overview of this talk, which we're in right now. Go ahead.
Yeah. Thanks so much, and thanks so much for the experience from the ground, for the relevant information. I just want to take a step back, because that's also the only thing I can do, and have a look at the structure at which this discussion is playing out. And I'd like to do that based on three premises. The first is that the internet is neither global, nor neutral, nor impartial. Just by example, the first application on the internet. We still use it a lot. Someone knows? Email. Perfect. Email. The oldest application, and it is still not possible to have an email address in a non-Latin language. The internet is made for Western Europe and the US. Second, changes to the world are not made in the language of diplomacy or law, but in the language of infrastructure. Keller Easterling. Third, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. Desmond Tutu. When the Ukrainian government asked RIPE NCC to block Russian networking resources, they responded that they would do everything within their legal means to exactly not do that. The Internet Society claims again and again that infrastructure should be neutral, but it's not. The Internet Society itself, only 1 year ago, tried to sell off the .org domain for a hedge fund after lifting limitations for the cost of domain owners. Multinational corporations have built an infrastructure of extraction and control. Nokia, the Finnish corporation, built SORM, the Russian infrastructure for internet surveillance. Cisco partially built the Great Chinese Firewall. The governance of the internet infrastructure ensures and enables an increase in connectivity, but this is not equal or equitous connectivity. On the commercial platforms of transnational corporations, the public cannot set rules for engagement and discussion, and take away income from independent media houses who cannot set the rules and cannot have the journalists report. Algorithmic governance is optimized to increase views and advertisement income, not a platform for knowledge production and information exchange. We need to take back the internet and its infrastructure, and this means we should radically redesign protocols, governance and infrastructure ownership. The infrastructure should exist to support civil society, not to enable military operations and propaganda. Institutions don't have human rights, people do. When military violate human rights, their internet resources should be suspended. In short, we should kick off the Russian military off the internet. Military internet infrastructure corporations multinational internet infrastructure corporations should be forced to facilitate connectivities to citizens and hamper surveillance and censorship. Infrastructure bodies have facilitated the appropriation of Ukrainian networks by Russia since 2014. This should have repercussions, because it's very clear that the tactical is political and not neutral.
Mm-hmm. Niels, very, very powerful. Now, I want to go to you, Vesna, in a minute. 1 second, Niels, one more question. Are you actually saying that because the internet is now not being owned and regulated by civil society, it's not being owned and regulated by independent media, that we should kick out not just the Russian military from the internet, but also all the tech giants and other monopolists that are dictating the way we use the internet?
For sure. Yes. Because this is part of the system that's reproducing violence and repression.
Okay, so Russia Today and Sputnik are just the beginning?
Yeah, for sure.
Who else?
No, we should have so the history of the internet is often told as this history of the fathers. But that is not true. There have been many children, mothers engaged in building networks of communication. And it's just that capital tells the story. Military industrial complex that built one network. that has won, that has pushed out the BBSs, that has pushed out the community networks, that has now built oligopolies and built oligopolies of telcos, that always have cooperated with state surveillance and censorship. So if we really want communication that we talk for liberation, for communities and peoples, we should redesign that infrastructure with that in mind, because else you're continuously addressing symptoms and not the inherent power structures that exist.
Are we then moving towards a globe where we have two internets?
We already have many internets.
Yeah.
That was my first thing. There is not one internet. And if there is one internet, it's built for people that look like me.
Yeah.
And not for people on other parts of the world. And so it is, the internet is a network of networks, and all these networks have always been able to set one rule. So this whole idea of one internet, it's not true. Yeah. It supports a dream that is material, politically, socially untrue. Yeah. If you visit the internet, if you go on the internet in Ethiopia, you have a very different experience from it here. Right. You know, and even in Germany, the internet's already radically different. Yeah. You cannot see houses on Street View in Germany. That's because there are different decorations, different social rules. So we should really stop talking about this one global, neutral, impartial, good internet, and connectivity is good, because it's not. You cannot be put in a room with Google and say, hey, we both have connectivity, we have an equal conversation. It's not. It's a multinational corporation. Yeah. You need to add power analysis to this.
Okay. We obviously move now to Vesna Manolovich, who introduced us at the very beginning of the evening with a moment that we all shared of experiencing the sorrow. In your daily life, you're a senior community builder at RIPE NCC, and you've noticed I'm not the technical expert, but RIPE NCC registers the IPS across the world, and your CEO, when this whole discussion started, when the ban on a technical level of Russia Today and Sputnik, what's going on here? Yeah? It's okay? Yeah. So then your CEO went on record saying, we can only be trusted for as long as we remain neutral. And he's very eloquent in describing this one internet for all across the globe. Exactly what Niels was raging against just now. So what is your response?
You're calling it hysterical.
Or opposing, maybe.
So, yes, so I want to make a big distinction between the content and the infrastructure. So, as the RIPE NCC, we do not make statements or get involved in regulating the content or the web or the websites or the media or the social media, because we are tasked with maintaining the registration of the infrastructure, which is IP resources, so IP addresses in Europe and, well, Russia and the former Soviet republics and Middle East. So our statement was that we are not going to deregister these internet resources that belong to Russia, because this would be a dangerous precedent in like breaking the infrastructure that we are tasked to maintain. And that is still our position. On the other hand, I do agree that technical is political, that we cannot anymore say, oh, this is just a technical decision. And we have been using multi-stakeholder approach to internet governance for the last 30 years, meaning the governments and multinational corporations theoretically do not have stronger position in these discussions than the civil society or the techies. However, our community has started by kind of a conversation between the network operators. We are techies, and we are not actually educated in the politics or history or even media literacy, so we do need you. We do need your input, and we are completely open for the conversations that are like the one that is happening now.
This is a very, very clear line, but in the end it also leads you and RIPE NCC as a whole to conclude, no, we're not going to deregister Sputnik and Russia Today.
Yes, and that is because the decision to do that would have to come to us through this process of consensus.
Yeah.
And that is a very, very long process. And
is this process going on right now?
Yes.
Is this being organized?
Well, yes and no. It's kind of complicated issue because people have to kind of bring on that subject, and then other people are against it, and then it kind of gets stuck. Mm-hmm. And our values are about keeping the connectivity and keeping the internet infrastructure open, regardless of what it is actually going to be used for. So that has been, and it's still, the main premise of like what we are doing.
Yeah. We, at the very beginning, we started with this thesis, and one of the questions was also, who are those responsible? Yeah, what was the word you used? Yeah. RIPE NCC is one of those
yes.
responsible parties.
Yes, and it is a shared responsibility. So,
and you're not responsible for the content, but you're responsible for the structure, for the infrastructure. Are you responsible for the infrastructure also of this ongoing process you're talking about in order to reach a certain consensus on a question like this? And you're saying it's complex, there's many interests speaking out, of course, but it's then up to you and RIPE NCC to keep that process going, no?
Yes, so there are again several layers of that. One is keeping a registry. So we are an trusted source of authoritative data, and this is where the unique resources are registered, including the Russian networks and Ukrainian networks. But again, they're not really divided by country or it is, in our view, internet is global. It is not national. Yeah. So in order to block certain resources, somebody would have to decide what is a country. So this is one of the reasons why we are not ready to deregister that. The second reason is that our function is administrative. So if there would be a consensus between operators to do some blocking, that is prerogative of all the independently interconnected networks. Mm-hmm. There is no central authority. So there was a suggestion to create a coordinated block list, and that is not currently a priority, and it's not like the main discussion which is happening within the RIPE community, and it could be. Mm-hmm. So if there is a need for that, that is a possibility, but currently that is not happening.
Wait, sorry Geert, we're being recorded, so we need you to use a microphone and to introduce
the Crimean IP space, is it Russian or Ukrainian? Just a question, you know, administratively, for you.
Yeah. So parts of that, parts of Crimean IP space are Russian and parts are Ukrainian. It's very confusing.
You might like to comment a bit more later, but you've been joined by your neighbor over here. So please introduce yourself and go ahead.
For giving us My name is Dmitry Belousov. I'm working in Russian media, government media actually, about 16 years. And maybe I can give a little bit more information about what is Russian propaganda is. Because when I'm listening about question on agenda, that's idea to reduce freedom of speech, I was shocked about even idea of this. Because Putin hates freedom of speech especially. And we are talking here about, oh, we should reduce freedom of speech. Actually, and just why? Because of Sputnik and RT. But what they're doing, they are actually using, like for research, some underground Western media looking for painful points of society and take it to the app for discussion, people interested in it. And it will not work by RT and Sputnik if it will be clear from Dutch media, from European media, if issue is have a discussion and it's not something forbidden, yeah? If we saw some, for example, what using RT like police with force arrested woman, yeah? What doing government? I don't care about government, I care about freedom. Government care about reputation and delete this video from all platforms and makes RT exclusive distributor of this content. You will block absolutely RT, Sputnik and everywhere, but people will send it by WhatsApp, by Telegram, by email, this video. And they will make, oh, all this government lie, only RT give us exclusive and true content. Mm-hmm. But it's not it's what they will do and what they actually doing when everywhere is blocked. It makes more trustful Russian propaganda for people who are interested to know this content. It's really dangerous.
You're saying blocking RT and Sputnik is going to actually
makes them like more available resource of news, more available resource of like hidden information which government want to hide here. You understand that?
And in a very ugly way, blocking, censoring actually these kind of channels.
Yeah, censoring is actually a way of Putin what he doing. I think problem have absolutely in our side because problem not in the content which distributed by RT and Russian media and what they're doing everywhere in media. Problem is in a way to understand what they're doing at all because sometimes like we are trying to react for each message what they're doing, but they don't make exclusive messages. Russian propaganda, it's not something that should be demonized because it's actually stupid in an idea how it works. I can explain. 10 years ago, Russian media was still better than now because there more was news programs like program Время on Channel 1, main programs in end of the week in Channel 2 and others. There was just a news. They show it news, yeah, some kind of like a pro-government news, but who don't make in pro-government news in government media. Now they changed it last years for like fake analytical programs. They don't talking about what happened, where, and when. They're talking about ideas why, what is the way, and it's actually conspiracy theory.
They're moving away from the facts.
Yeah, and they have.
Please,
yep.
Can you round up?
Yeah. And the idea is really what is the real resistance for this. Do not go for arguing with these conspiracy theories because people don't believe like news from West because they think, oh, they are using in our conspiracy theory. We don't trust them because we are following correct theory. So, resistance of this propaganda should be thinking this way and answer to these groups who get this content, to give them also, they want to have a way of thinking, to create way of thinking.
Okay, this is back to where Ruben started off. Would you like to comment, Ruben?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all...
For anybody else who wants to join, there's 2 chairs available right now. Go ahead, Ruben.
Yeah, so many things have been said. The internet is connected through the internet. Is based on the internet protocol, which actually indeed connects different networks. So the internet is also defined as a network of networks, actually, but people see it as something like television, that is like broadcasting, but it's definitely not the case, because otherwise the network would definitely not be resilient. So the other thing I think the gentleman from Russia and also Diana raised was that there is also a responsibility of the users, the internet users themselves, because we at least at the Make Media Great Again working group, we realize that okay, there might be fake news, there might be wrong information, but still it wouldn't be so impactful if it wasn't spread by the internet users. So actually the internet, the definition of the internet should not only be limited to the devices, the electronic devices that we're talking about, but also the human networks that use that infrastructure. Because you could say something is coming from a computer, is then coming to a end user, an organic device, you could say, and then someone else is saying it to someone else. This person is looking it up on the internet and is then spreading it indeed through WhatsApp. So the organic part, so the humans are an integral part, I see them as an integral part of the internet, and that also comes with a responsibility of the end user. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So there are no Russians, you could say there are no Dutch people, there are like groups of networks. It's not a homogeneous group, you see? And then, of course, when it concerns the freedom of speech, so, yeah, is it sacrosanct? Well, even if you look at the law, at least in the Netherlands, it says that no one has permission to broadcast or to use the press or whatever to broadcast his or her thoughts. But it should be taken into account his or her responsibility against the law, regarding the law. So if you are doing things under the umbrella of free speech, but it enables disconnect between people or hate speech or anything that is actually against other laws, you have a responsibility. So coming again back to the responsibility of the users, there are nodes, also organic nodes of the networks, who have their own responsibility.
But then we're talking about the law, and the law is different from nation to nation.
Exactly,
of course.
exactly.
How
so
do you deal with that?
Exactly. So the issue here is that you are looking into national law and you have international law, and the lack actually of maybe like agreements between nations. So what we also saw, that was actually more from someone studying polarization from the academic workplace of the municipality of Amsterdam. We could see that polarization is enabled by 2 axes. So one axis, you have the part of information, so you give more information, people have the ability to think critically, so it has nothing to do with critique, but critical thinking is related to the weighing of evaluating information. And on the other axis, you have the engagement of people. So when it concerns the engagement, the higher the engagement with a certain topic, the less susceptible people are for what we call reflective thinking or critical thinking. So Although there might not be international laws enforcing that, as far as I know, because I'm not a legal expert. But I do believe also with regards to capacity building relating to cybersecurity and also related to critical thinking, that we should also think on the exact moment when information is being released to the audience, to the broader audience. And I think in that regard you can make, you can develop policy on that. Yeah. But again, I don't believe it's the task of the internet infrastructure organizations, although what Neil addresses indeed the lack of inclusivity in building the internet, actually, and also the lack of inclusivity in developing new protocols is definitely problematic. But as I said before, I'm also a serial tech entrepreneur, and I do believe, I'm rounding up, that, well, in Netherlands we have a saying, wie betaalt, bepaalt. So who pays controls. And what you can see is that in recent decennia, the people, the organizations like governments or knowledge institute have invested less in the development of internet protocols, while the investments of corporates, actually that's Niels's thesis, of corporates actually building the internet on a protocol level have increased, and I'm quite sure they're not there for charity.
Exactly, and they are also not there for the kind of media literacy that you're propagating, in which we learn how to think critically. Now, we've been joined by two gentlemen here in the fishbowl. Actually, somebody has to leave because... Okay. We have two chairs available. Go ahead, and I hope you stick to the questions we're talking about right now.
Okay, well, this will be a Russian chair, so I'm Russian, though I happen to live in the Netherlands for 21 years. I work for Utrecht University, I work in TU Delft, and I'm an engineer, and I'm a user. So all these years I used internet as source of information and as instrument to get or stay in touch with my relatives in Russia and to do some social internship for disabled people. My name is Maxim, by the way. I would like to roll back a bit in this discussion and look at the time when Russian internet was a free space. I think from 1995 till 2011, 2012, Russian-speaking community feel itself safe and free in the internet area. The government took control gradually on that space in the last 10 years after riots and protests in Russia. So analyzing how this happened may probably help you understanding how to counteract. Well, another thing, can we, some analogies, can we look into the internet?
Give us the brief version, yeah?
Right. As a network of shops where we're buying stuff. So information is food for our brains. So toxic products should be somehow controlled or kicked out from the shops. In 20s, we could buy some psychoactive substances in apotheques. You could even buy the ice cream with uranium. It's not available anymore. So how about taking a look at this? Russian-speaking society, I think, there is a lack of social education and social disciplines in schools, educational system. So I would say a great deal of Russian-speaking users are acting like infants or like teenagers. So you are dealing with the government, which imagine internet that would be built by teenagers. How would look it like this? Yeah? How much aggression would be there? All right? So you are adult people who need to somehow deal with teenagers that building their system of relations.
Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Yeah. Again, this ties into the story about media literacy and its value. Yes. I know Leon Willems as the director of Free Press Unlimited, so a champion of the free speech. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Leon.
I'm a champion of press freedom. And in this case, I'm not a champion of free expression in the way that it's distributed in this discussion in every aspect.
Okay.
And I want to explain why. I will not speak on the comments that were made about Russian culture, etc. If you look at press freedom in Russia, is already under threat since 2000. And so we see a progressive, aggressive tendency to suppress freedom. So that's the reality of Russia. It's a reality in many other countries of the world, by the way, so it's not exceptional. I want to bring a couple of things to the fore, which I think are relevant to the discussion, and then maybe we can get further in the discussion who's responsible here, because I think that's what is missing a little bit. First of all, the current Russian information warfare through propaganda is about 3 billion a year. And it's compared and counteracted by investments in quality, good practice journalism to approximately a maximum extent of 100 million a year. Maybe a little bit more, but I'm not necessarily immediately counting, let's say, Radio Free Europe, because it's American funded. Maybe it's not, you know, maybe it can be seen as adversarial. But I'm talking about real quality Russian journalism, the type of people that have paid with their life, from Novaya Gazeta, maybe Echo Moskvy, you know. If you look at the comparative analysis of how these investments are made, we're talking about asymmetric warfare. And I think the discussion at this table can be relevant if we believe in the true free citizens in a liberal country that is ruled by rule of law and where people have equal access and opportunity to access information. That is not the reality, and I support very strongly what Neil said earlier. If you make a power analysis of that, that is not the reality in about 92% of this Earth's population. In other words, to think that individual freedoms that we entertain here can be made to reproduce in repressive societies where people have no access to in an equal way of information, are deprived from access to the internet in many cases, is a very elitist approach to this problem. And we are underestimating the poison of Russian propaganda into the information sphere in Europe. There's symptomatic research about the number of Russian propagandists that are anchors at Italian television stations explaining the war in Ukraine, against Ukraine, I should say, in a Russian narrative. There's people that think radio, you know, that Russia Today is a balance to the American propaganda in Germany. So we should not underestimate the influence in our democracy of this propaganda, which I would say is not information, but is poison that should be regulated. So for me, it's not the question whether RT or Sputnik necessarily is the most important target to block. I think there are other more poisonous, as you were saying, I think social media factories, in many cases actually supported by European industries.
But should they be blocked anyway?
In my view, the blockage is not something that we should fight under a freedom of expression lemma. And that is what I heavily oppose to the current appeal to the European Court. I think that is wrong. I don't necessarily disagree with this blanket decision by the European Union because it may be in one way disproportionate, and it's also feeding this idea that Brussels then says, you know, let the tech companies decide. But I also really am disappointed by the lack of responsibility on people in the internet industry, in the freedom of internet community, about the total lack of ethical responsibility for the garbage that is being spread on these nets.
Yeah.
And we have to do something about it because we are destroying our liberal democracy.
Right. And we have already destroyed to a great level the people in the Crimea,
and we should support
Russia,
independent journalists
Belarus.
to be able to have the connection to, and we are doing everything we can.
One more question.
Yeah.
Where do we look for those, just a stupid question, where are the people responsible? Who do we hold accountable?
I think first and foremost the big tech oligopolies on the internet. We should at least tax them so that we can give the 20% of those billions back to quality journalism, because it would help journalists tremendously. That's number one. But I also think there is a real discussion needed in the internet freedom advocates on how do we start a real discussion on what we do not want to foster by our technical infrastructure. There was a technical infrastructure also in other genocides, in other periods of Europe, and we cannot claim that, you know, this idea of a neutral internet and the idea that as responsible citizens we have our own responsibility, and so yes, we all watch child pornography. I mean, sorry, it just doesn't go in my brain as a free and independent person.
Ilya?
Yeah, I'll like to quickly respond to that, because I think Russian propaganda is also spreading throughout the world. It's not only attacking Europe, it's throughout the world, in Brazil and other countries. It's very effective there. So it's very crucial that we tackle it. And I think Europe should respond. Now we had future Europe sessions. I think we should have future internet session. Just as what Macron did for European Union, we should also have in Europe session throughout Europe, together as Europeans, have a discussion with the government, with the people and the tech industry, and together with three of us we shall come to idea what is the internet, what is freedom of internet, and what should be regulated. Because we need to get things regulated, we need things regulated by the governments, people also need to understand what is being regulated, if they have opinion in the voice, and also we need to have equality in the internet in Europe. Because the quality of internet in Europe is also important to bring positive changes to the internet and internet responsibilities.
Okay. Leon, and then...
One thing I forgot to add actually is that at the moment I do not see the urgency of thousands of technologically interested people to find a way to keep 250 million people that are now distracted from any kind of information, so Russians, but you know, about 250 million people. What is then the responsibilities also, if you don't want to close the internet for bad information coming this way, what are we going to do on getting good information to the people of Russia? So I think that we need to have a discussion about that too, and it's not really happening, not even in the tactical media room.
Okay. This might be the moment that Geert Lovink would step in, but I've seen Vesna also taking a lot of notes, and Diana is waiting.
Yeah, I just shortly, in my opinion, the freedom of speech and the freedom of available information on internet shouldn't be blocked. It's kind of, you know, you should know what your enemy, how your enemy thinking and what the enemy is spreading, what kind of information they prepare for your brain. So you should know your enemy face to face when you're reading, but the solution could be only not to block it, just to make kind of detect of fake news and to put the red, I don't know, border that it's fake and the link to the truth. You should know. You should see the different parts of the coin, right? Because if you see only one part...
Which is possible maybe in this part of Europe, but
maybe technology will find some solution how to do that.
1 second.
In the future.
Because your neighbor is bubbling for a while. Geert Lovink, for those sorry Geert, for those who don't know him, he's been the internet thinker, critic, writer, researcher and professor from the very beginning, based here in Amsterdam. Go ahead.
Yeah, I very much agree with what you are suggesting. We should really start to plan for this big gathering, maybe here in Amsterdam, about the European future of the internet. Why I'm saying this is that I would like to take you back, to the very beginning of this initiative. It was 1 week into the war, and there was an open day in De Waag, here in Nieuwmarkt. And there was a call like, okay, shall we discuss the situation in Ukraine? We gathered there. Marleen was there, who was the director and founder of De Waag. I was there, and 2 others. Chris was there, and Bibi was there. Bibi is, I think she's not here at the moment. I'm not even sure if there are people at the moment here from Freedom Internet, the ISP, which is, the follow-up, let's say, at least this is how they claim, of the original Access for All, which was in '98 bought by KPN and in the last year thoroughly destructed and dismantled. Okay, so she was there too, and we had at this very beginning we had no idea. We had a very, very interesting and controversial debate with. We were there with 4 almost random people, and I can only tell you a really fierce debate between, let's say, people from the Netherlands. It doesn't happen so often, right? This is a consensus culture, and so I was fascinated that we were sitting there, all like-minded people, disagreeing to the core about this topic. And it really meant for me, there is something into this. We need to dig deeper. And this evening here, we are trying for the first time to dig deeper, I think, Ilya, with the aim to go for, a real European summit of the people to design, our internet. Because we have to reclaim it, this is clear, but how do we do this, right? We have the protocols and the standards. Yes, we have to dig very deep, but we also have to take the responsibility for the content, right? There's no way back. There is no hiding anymore of some quasi-neutral engineering class, that is now being corrupted and completely taken over by Facebook, Google, and the rest, right? So that is no longer a possibility for, in my view, for a European internet. I would love to see this evening and our initiative, which consists of about 20 organizations here in the Netherlands from both sides. In this debate, we are coming, and every week we have versions or snippets of this debate. On the one hand, the people who are coming from journalism, who work on fake news, propaganda, who have a deep understanding of the workings of the Putin machinery on the one hand, and the internet community on the other hand. But why is that? Because we are in Amsterdam, and we need to understand the unique situation we are in here in this small city, which is a considerable global internet hub with a lot of tech companies on the one hand, but we also have a very strong tradition of defending freedom of the press, of defending NGO civil society discourse, right? So we are bringing these 2 worlds together, and at the moment they are colliding. But Vesna started, with a 1 minute of silence, and I think that is our starting point. That is our starting point, and we need to see it as a fruitful debate to redraw, to rethink the architecture of the internet here in Europe.
Vesna?
I would like to say something on a personal note and not as a representative of technical community. I have...
By the way, before you do that, it might be good to mention that RIPE NCC is also based in Amsterdam. Yes, yeah? Yes. So you are part...
Yes, yes. But like my personal story is also connected to what Gert was saying, like long-standing history of Access for All, because I come from Yugoslavia and I have lived through the sanctions against Serbian internet. And I've worked for the 3 organizations that actually had internet connectivity despite of the sanctions. And one of them was so-called OpenNet. We had connectivity with Access for All because they've managed to find a loophole in the Dutch way in the sanction regulations. And so they have supported independent media against the blanket sanctions that were actually negatively impacting the citizens. As somebody said, the propagandists at that time in Serbia also managed to turn around this statement of like, oh, the media should be forbidden. So they used it in their benefit. They were saying, oh, look, those people in Europe, they are not as liberal as they are claiming to be because they are blocking our freedoms. And so they can just spin it the other way too. And so personally, my solution at that time that I was taking part in was low tech. And this is what I would also like to suggest in the light of environmental impact that the internet is having too. So instead of growing this network to be bigger and bigger, we can also go back and actually rely on the older technologies, older tech, recycle, reuse the old equipment, and go back to actually communicating because we want to connect people to people rather than companies to companies and servers to servers, which you were saying. Like, it's not only about building the tech internet, it's about building the internet for the humans.
Yes, this is what has been mentioned now, and I'm glad you bring up this one thing that wasn't touched upon before, that if we put the internet sanctions under all the other economic sanctions that are now in force on Russia, you might be disadvantaging the wrong people. Yeah. The people who need to understand how news and truth and facts work. We are joined by 2 people here, and Niels is in a hurry, so I'll give you the microphone first.
No, I just want to... I wanted to shortly respond to that, because no one implied that there should be blanket sanctions. No. No one.
Not here.
So not here. And first, so people say sanctions do not work. First of all, the reason that the Netherlands is not occupying Indonesia anymore, it's because the US instated sanctions against the Netherlands. That's why we stopped being a colonial country, not because of the goodness of our heart, but because of American sanctions and the stopping of the Marshall help. That's why we stopped colonialism. Having said that, sanctions are not a perfect instrument. And sanctions should be made better, and that's why they become more and more targeted. That's why I also said sanctions should be in line with international law and human rights. But if we look at human rights, as you all know, we have the Universal Declaration that became inscribed in international law through the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights. Article 19, of course, says freedom of expression and information, but Article 20 forbids explicitly propaganda. Right? This is already in our human rights body of law. And we should be using international law, of which sanctions are an inherent part, to further that. And therefore we should of course not limit connectivity to citizens and and initiatives that proliferate human rights. But there should be consequences for those who violate them. And then finally, I have one issue with putting the responsibility of propaganda on individuals. I find this personally really a neoliberal trope, where individuals are being blamed for systemic issues. You cannot blame the poor for being poor. That's an issue of distribution. So I don't think people should educate themselves better. No, the systems and the institutions are responsible for upholding the rights, access, and access to education, and individuals should not be blamed for that.
I agree very much. Go ahead and please introduce yourself.
Hello, good evening. I'm Christina. Chris, I'm Russian. I live in the Netherlands since '91. I work at the Netherlands Institute for Sound and Vision. I'm a researcher and project leader. And I'm also involved in a project, well, in a coalition that's called Shared Digital European Public Space, together with Open Future Foundation and the Commons Network. And this actually, our discussion here connects very much what we are talking about there also. And it's actually involving civil society in the creation and in sustaining our internet. And now we are talking about blocking state propaganda in Russia, reaching Europe. But my question is like, why? Why are we talking about this actually? Why is that so important to talk about blocking Russian state propaganda? Why are we not talking about connecting to Russian civil society and Russian opposition and Russian independent media, as well as Belarusian independent media, as well as all of the independent and civil society in all the post-Soviet regions, in all post-Soviet regions. So that's my statement. I think we need to talk about that much more, and I hope that this group will keep on working, and we will keep on doing this this debate, because the war is not yet over, and it's not going to be over for a long time. I hope it will be over tomorrow, today, but there is a lot of work to do.
When we're talking about responsibility, I agree very much with what you say. Leon Willems just gave us the figures, yeah? We're talking about 3 billion versus 100 million. State propaganda versus, let's say, serious or independent media. What should the responsible bodies do in order to create that support?
Yes, I understand. Just getting back to this, to the independent and dependent and state. There is, say that we believe that 70% of the Russians is pro-war. There is still the 30% who is against the war. And this is 35 million people. And all those people, they are in Russia or they are fleeing their country. Yeah. So what can we do?
Like the people in Belarus, like the people in Crimea.
Exactly. Yeah? And they are all well-educated and well-educated people, professionals, who exactly know how to deal with internet. And then I want to also address what you said. Russian internet was the most free space until 2011. And Russians did protest, and they do protest as much as they can, but I think we need to help those people to go on with their protest.
So where is the responsibility to give that help?
It's with the people who use the internet. It's with us to give them their support from out the West. I really think that the West should help civil society to do that, not focusing on blocking state propaganda and giving energy to that, but to support civil society.
Yeah.
I think it's also time that they always say the internet was in the Wild West, or internet was still discovering itself in last 20 years. I think we're at the point now that we can say that internet is an adult enough to make regulations and to see how we can work together on the internet. because Belarus has just been banning since 2006 a lot of things, and it also comes from uneducated guess. It worked with Western companies to block internet in Belarus. They didn't come up to an idea by themselves to block the internet, they worked with the Western companies. And this comes from uneducated guess from the Western media what to do with Western companies, what to do with oppressive regimes like Myanmar, like Hong Kong, and I can name another 5, I think, if I have a time to think about it. But it also lies on the Western companies and discussion here to kind of stop working with oppressive regimes and stop working for open internet, for open access for everyone. If we can spend this much time and this much energy on working on oppressive internet, I don't know if what can happen with internet if we do spend a lot of time and money on open internet for everyone. So we should kind of start looking on other side also. For the last 20 years, a lot of Western companies, Cisco and such as Nokia, they worked on oppressive regimes in Israel as well. Yeah. And I think it's time that we will work on open internet for everyone.
It's also...
That's the problem, yeah.
Ruben, join us.
Yeah, no, he just blurted it out, but... so what you can see is that, yeah, it boils down to money and power. And in the case of money, of course, Leo already pointed it out that... So that's a related topic, but you can see that the investments in media in general have been decreased also. So people are now getting used to not paying for media, actually, getting media for free, where you get a perverted business model of advertisement that actually enforces fake news and things that are that people like to debate about. But that's a different topic. So the structure of the internet, we only look at like the cables that are going to the sea, or maybe now we're looking into satellites that transmit internet data. But what I find worrisome is actually the dependence of the layer underneath that, and that's the energy layer. Actually, I mean, how will you manage computers if you don't have any electricity to power these computers? So looking into looking into increasing levels of sustainability for Western society, of course, but also countries that are dependent of the internet, I think is crucial, because we can see now, and I guess that's probably also the reason that the Biden administration is not so actively looking into blocking, because there is a dependency, at least from the West, on the energy coming from Russia.
Okay. I'll have a short thing about money. $3 billion is spent, and I think they spend so much money because it takes them so much money to bring the fake news towards us. We're very hard to convince, so they spend so much money. Yeah, we're very expensive for them. And I think we should be also more innovative. A lot of things are too expensive now, but I think if we start to become innovative and working together, a lot of things will become cheaper to also activate those things.
Leon, and then we're going into our final remarks, yeah?
Maybe just to avoid any misunderstanding, the problem of power is that, I mean, 6 or 7 years ago, people said to me, oh, look, Leon, the dark web, it will be the solution for free expression. And I said, look, if all the banks of the world are already investing in the dark web, what is your idea about power structures? I mean, we have to be realistic here, right? We're working in a Europe that is under fire from disintegration, neoliberalism, where there is no beginning of sense of urgency of restructuring the economic model. That is the reality. And this is the problem. So as long as it's more profitable to make money the way Facebook does, and so I personally think it is an abomination that well-trained, highly professional, educated people work for Facebook if it was instrumental for what happened in Myanmar with Rohingya. But if so that is personal responsibility and ethics. But we have to work on ethics in the business sector. And one way of doing that, unfortunately, is taxation. I mean, in the end of the day, why do we have roads?
Yeah.
Why do we have water resources? Because we tax. We pay tax.
Yeah. This leads.
So I don't disagree with you. It's just
okay.
We need to
listen. We're supposed to leave this place at around 10. It's almost 10. So make it very brief.
Is it on? Yes. I'm Mark from Amsterdam. Hello. Member of the public. I heard a lot of good things that were said. I also want to add one other thing, that's to invest in children's education. I think in the European Union, in democratic countries, and also countries where democracy is endangered, it's very important to educate children to be aware about the media, the dangers, fake news, that kind of things, so they can recognize it later when they grow up.
Yeah.
It's also
this
important.
leads very naturally to the final question. Diana, you're going to be one of the people who are going to speak. We started off with a few introductions, and then the thesis that is the question is the freedom of the internet sacrosanct, or should those who are responsible be able to regulate, and why? I've been hearing here, I think we've been part of a talk tonight which is actually one step in an ongoing weekly Amsterdam talk about these questions. This time it's open to the audience. I hope, Geert, that you will be able to include more people from this circle in the upcoming conversations too, because what you see here is serious questions about the blockade of Sputnik and RT for legal reasons, for technical reasons, but there's much more emphasis up to you on the importance of supporting the independent voices, supporting the voices who are reporting the truth, and strengthening the media literacy of populations who are hungry for truth, facts, and justice, even if it's very hard for them to access that, including the kids, of course. So I would like to ask a few people to comment on the final question. If those responsible are prone to just reproduce the power structures that we are living in, then how can others, including ourselves, take responsibility? Because if those who are formally or economically responsible are not doing it, how can people like us and the organizations that we work with take that responsibility? A night like this is a simple act of taking that responsibility. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I think it's by building and sustaining communities, networks, connecting with each other, using all technology that we have at hand, and actually what you were talking about, that it's all in English and it's all in Latin. We need to overcome that in a way, and we don't have to wait to for those who have the responsibility, because we all have the responsibility. Okay. We all who are here have our own responsibility, and if we work together, we can overcome it, I think.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a big global question, I think. And now we see how the world united, step by step, with the help of cruel war. Ukraine shows people how can we unite and what can we do together. And now we see the global process that changing our society to the future that we can't imagine 10, 20, 30 years ago, we can't imagine that such fast progress, technical progress, will unite people. So I can imagine that I can write message to the ambassador of South Korea, of Ukraine, who was the ambassador. He's my friend on Facebook. I can send him a message today in Ukrainian language, and he can use Google Translate and understand me, right? So it's a process that we can stop, but we can use it, and we can teach each other how to make it more easy, and it's easy to unite. So just go on with that.
It's easy to unite. Thank you for a very hopeful line right in the middle of this night. Ilya. And then, yeah, go ahead, Vesna.
I'd like to respond to you, and I hope we can build crowdsourced translation and not rely on the Google Translate in the future. So that's one answer, like how can we do that? The other answer is echoing what you said, to resist. We need to resist all these oppressors. Some are very obvious and some are less obvious, like the neoliberal system which actually pampers us and makes us compliant, but we need to resist that one too. So, and what you were saying, that's also one of the answers, which is human connections. So we can do this together.
Okay.
I will add to that people who make regulations, like older generation who have no idea what internet is, they should consult with communities and techies to actually make laws that make sense, instead of just banning things and being afraid of the internet. Always saying, oh, TikTok brings danger, Instagram brings